Hi, this is April. Welcome back to my channel. I have always been an APS-C shooter, but recently I've discovered some of the benefits of shooting with a full frame sensor. But the one thing that I really am having an issue with is the weight of the body and the lens combination. The weight of the Sony A7 IV isn't so bad at about 660 grams, but when you're pairing it with some of the heavier lenses that can weigh well over 400 grams, it can be pretty fatiguing after trying to go out for a long day and trying to shoot some nature vlogs. And especially if you're trying to hold the camera up and vlog yourself, it really can get tiring. So I recently picked up the Sony ZV-E1, which is a full frame camera, but it's in a really light body. It's under 500 grams, and it has the articulating flip out screen that I always had wanted. Now there are some really light prime full frame lenses you can get for Sony, such as a Sigma 17mm f4 and the Sony 24mm 2.8 G lens. But I was asking myself, what about the new Sony A6700 that just came out? I'm really at home with APS-C lenses. They're really light and they're really cost effective. So I decided to buy the Sony A6700 and try it out. And I wanted to see exactly what I'd be losing as compared to a full frame sensor. When I didn't know any better about the difference in the sensor size and the effects with low light and shallow depth of field, I was completely happy using APS-C cameras. So this is a Sony A6700, and it has a fully articulating flip out screen just like I wanted for vlogging. And weighing in just under 500 grams, there's not a lot of difference between the weight of this camera and the Sony ZV-E1. And the thing that I really love about the Sony A6700, which has changed from older models, is the red record button right on the top. That is a major benefit. So I decided to take both of these cameras out and see the differences in action. I used the Sony 11mm lens f1.8 that's meant for APS-C cameras. I used it on both because the Sony ZV-E1 has a special dynamic stabilization mode that crops in about 30%. So the APS-C lens works pretty well with the Sony ZV-E1, and I thought it would be the nicest lens to try on both of them. This is a test of the Sony ZV-E1 using the Sony 11mm lens, open to 1.8 using active steady shot. And this is a test of the Sony ZV-E1 using the Sony 11mm lens open to 1.8 using dynamic stabilization. This is a test of the Sony A6700 with the Sony 11mm lens open to 1.8 with standard steady shot. This is a test of the Sony A6700 with the 11mm lens open to 1.8. Active steady shot is turned on. That jangly noise you hear is those camera strap holders. This is a low light test of the Sony ZV-E1 using the Sony 11mm f1.8. This is a low light test of the Sony A6700 with the Sony 11mm lens open to 1.8. The major difference between the two cameras is that the Sony ZV-E1 has dynamic stabilization, which almost looks like a gimbal if you walk gently and you're going forward or backward. It doesn't work super well when you're panning. Now, the Sony A6700 does not have dynamic stabilization, but it has really good active stabilization, and it works really well with the in-body image stabilization built into the camera, so that the IBIS and the electronic stabilization work hand in hand, and it works a lot better than just the IBIS that the Sony A6600 had. So I wanted you to see this comparison and see if the lack of dynamic stabilization in the A6700 is a deal breaker for you. Now, both cameras can film in 4K 120 frames per second, but the Sony A6700, besides the APS-C crops in even more. But it's not really a deal breaker because I'm always wanting to get closer to birds and squirrels and rabbits when I'm trying to film them. I can never get close enough with the reach of my lens. One other major benefit of the Sony A6700 over the ZV-E1 is that it has a viewfinder. It might not be the best viewfinder, but it's actually quite a bit brighter than the one on the A6600, and I really enjoy having it there, especially in bright light. With the Sony ZV-E1 not having any viewfinder, you could find yourself at a bit of a loss in really sunny conditions, but both of them make incredible footage. So this isn't a really spec heavy comparison or anything like that, because I'm not really that tech savvy. I just love trying out cameras and comparing the images that both of them can make. The thing I love about both of these cameras is they have separate modes for stills, movie, and S&Q. The ZV-E1 has a little switch right here, and the A6700 has the same type of switch right here. Now, as far as taking photos goes, the ZV-E1 only has 12 megapixels, but I have been able to get some amazing images from that, and I will do a separate comparison in another video. This was mostly just video related, but if you're looking for more resolution, the Sony A6700 has 26 megapixels, so you are going to get more detail in your images and be able to zoom in a little bit more and crop. But the Sony ZV-E1 is truly no slouch as far as taking photos with the 12 megapixels. It's phenomenal in low light. So the prices of the two cameras are running roughly $600 apart. The Sony A6700 is running about $1,400 on most websites, and the Sony ZV-E1, I have seen it go for about $2,100, but I was able to get mine for $1,800 used, almost like new on B&H Photo. So you just have to ask yourself, is the full frame sensor worth about $600 more? Or do you prefer the APS-C lenses being so much lighter and cheaper? And I don't think you're getting so much of a quality loss between APS-C and full frame. Now, if you're shooting in a lot of low light situations, and I'm talking extreme low light, the full frame sensor is really going to be an advantage. And if you're really wanting to have that super shallow depth of field, if you're doing portrait work, I would say a full frame sensor might be an advantage, but you could get the Sigma 56mm lens 1.4, and you would be amazed by how shallow the depth of field can look on that lens. If you like this video, give it a like, consider subscribing for more camera reviews from a newbie like me. God bless.